the feminist ideology that has been treated in literature. The influence has gone far. As I said about activism, activism is not rooted in literature. However, we are in a postmodern age where everything must have a utilitarian value. Anything that does not have a utilitarian value seems not to be of any importance. So the question keeps coming, what do we do with literature? What do we do with literature? And literature at a point become a medium of expression. So now people, writers, picked up this medium to express their mind on the issue of woman in Africa, the representation of woman in African art, how this is done. The critics actually have given a direction to how woman question could be solved, how woman issue could be treated, and the writers have picked it up and then taken a position on how to present women in literary art in such a way that it will reflect a correct position of who woman is in African context. Now, what I'm saying here is that African literature or African literary criticism can make use of it, feminism, as a mode of activism or a means of advocating for women issues, women-related issues, if they are properly handled. But there is a challenge. Feminism itself, even in Africa, has a lot of contentions within itself. The feminist house is not a quiet house. After the war outside, they come inside and have a lot of controversies and challenges among themselves. It has become a big challenge even in this present time. You see, when you look at the feminist movement itself, it has been categorized into waves, into phases, and actually there is a little difference between wave and phases. The waves has to do with feminism, feminist engagement outside of the academic, whereas the phases has to do with feminism as engaged both in academic and outside of the academic. There is a kind of a yearning for a disconnect. The younger generation of feminists try to kick against the earlier or the older feminists, and they have something they call familiar metaphors like sisterhood, like mother. The younger feminists, particularly, they are agitating that no, we don't need this. You are creating the patriarchal mood that have created a kind of authority or unnecessary anxiety in the community, in the society for us. So we don't need it. What I'm saying is that these are familiar and metaphors in feminism that even in African studies we could see. They are actually there to connect the past with the present and create a mutual connection among the feminists. However, there is no agreement.
Sorry, sir, please round up. Please round up. You know, we are running behind time.
Hello?
Please round off your picture, sir.
All right. So what I'm saying here is that feminism has actually created an impact, and there is a possibility for it to move forward. But the question I ask is, and the emergence of the concept of post-feminism has created uncertainty among us, because after the word post, what next comes in feminism. So my conclusion is that African literature has evolved to produce a lot of discourse on women in Africa. African literature produce discourse on woman question generally under the umbrella term of feminism. And there is also a relationship between African literature and African literary criticism. Now, I'd like to end by saying that there is an expectation that African literary criticism will keep pace with the changing issue in African continent and the world today. And it will not just remain stagnant in recycling some of these ideas that have come up before, but look at the issues rising up in a contemporary African situation today in regards to women, and then take a position that will create a better impact. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the wonderful paper that you have presented. And well, I don't know whether we have time for question answer session. Where do coordinator that? Well,
Yes.
do you have time for the question answer session right now?
So we can move on to the next one, sir. Sir, it is better. Next session, we can move
Yes.
on to the next session.
So, well, next session will be chaired by
Professor
Purnendu
Kumar Bhattacharya.
So, yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. God bless you.
Thank you, sir. May I request Professor Purnendu Kumar Bhattacharya to chair the next session. In this session of Professor Purnendu Bhattacharya, we have speakers Dr. Friday A. Okon from the Department of English, University of UO, Dr. Rebecca Okon Usoro from the Department of English, University of UO. We also have Dr. Rebecca Okon Usoro, and after that we have Dr. Srijoni Roy, Ebere K. Kribasu, Tamalika Dash, Tanbir Sahanawaz. So may I now request Professor Purnendu Kumar Bhattacharya to conduct this session.
Good morning, coordinator, moderator. I am Dr. Friday Okon of the Department of English, University of Uyo. My paper is entitled Sources and Themes in Uto Ibibio. Sources and Themes in Uto Ibibio. This paper tries to show that Uto is an indigenous performative art. It is oral poetry originated by the Ibibio people. It is popular art performed everywhere, at the markets, at people's houses, in the court of traditional rulers, and so on. Also, Uto is based on the cultural settings, the worldview and the thought patterns of the Ibibio people. And then we look at the sources of Uto. The poets get their inspiration from the worldview, from their culture, from their traditions, from their cosmology, from the land, the topography, and they also get inspiration from activities of modern life, especially as they have affected the culture and traditions of the Ibibio people. These are some of the sources of Uto. Then Uto, like any other poetry tradition, takes on various themes. In fact, the themes that are inherent in Uto run the gamut of experiences of the Ibibio people. You have love, you have grace, you have death, sadness, funerals, births, things that bring about joy, those things that bring about sadness, of course, frustration and disappointment, as in the case of inability to have a marital relationship or disappointment in love relationships. These and many other things, as can be found in poetry all over the world, are also found in Uto Ibibio. The performers themselves are usually part-time poets. They don't do it, they don't perform it as an occupation that earns a living for them. But they do it as a part-time kind of activity, maybe because of the love they have for the arts, for the art form. They may also be sponsored by some patrons. They can be used for politics, where they stand out to recite their works to the applause of the people. Uto is something that is quite indigenous, and this writer, this researcher is trying to say that in view of what is going on, in view of globalization and the effects, negative effect of mass media, modern mass media on the biblioculture, that it is necessary for us to do things to preserve and make this art form survive the times, because it is an art form that gives the biblioman gives him a sense of belonging and well-being in this cosmos that is so turbulent. Thank you very much. Well, I don't know, they are not making...
Professor Bhattacharya, please unmute your mic, please. Professor P.K. Bhattacharya, please unmute your mic, please. Yeah, now it is audible. Yes. Yes, sir.
Hello.
Sir, Chairperson, sir. Professor Punendu Kumar Bhattacharya, sir. Professor A.O. Achebe.
Okay, sir.
Professor A.O. Achebe will speak. Okay, he is online. Will you allow him to speak? He is online.
Yes, I am online.
Yeah.
I'm online. Yes, I'm online.
Yeah, please, please.
Welcome.
Professor A.O.
Can I go ahead?
Achebe. Yes.
Yes, I'm online. All right.
Please,
Good
please.
morning, everybody.
Okay.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon. So, I hope you can hear me well. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Professor all right.
Please continue.
Right. Thank you. Yes, I appreciate the organizers, Rishi Bakim, Chandra College, for the opportunity of this international webinar. So, my paper is titled "30s: Broken Shell, Fragmentation and Reconstruction of African Society in Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart." Tortoise, broken shell, fragmentation and reconstruction of African society in Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. Researched in this article, it's the intersection between anthropology, African anthropology, and African literature. Nigeria is a big country that has over 200 ethnic groups, and Chinua Achebe, who happens to be a literary icon and who is part of the inspiration behind this conference, he has made an impact. He has made a very strong impact in the world, not just in Africa, but in the literature of the world, due to its works. And among his works, Things Fall Apart happens to be the most renowned, the most reviewed, and the most read, and it has been translated into many languages. And apart from that, previous critics who have examined these texts, they viewed it from the sociocultural, political, feminist, literary. However, a salient aspect is the broken shell of the tortoise, which is alluded to in the tale or the folk tale narrated by Ekwefi, one of the wives of Okonkwo in Things Fall Apart. So I focused my lens on this particular folk tale in order to show that beyond the fable, it is a metaphoric depiction of the condition in Africa. You know, previous critics who have looked at this who have looked at this folktale, particularly Achebe, twists the motive, the figure of the tortoise. He sees it and reads it in terms of Okonko's rise and fall. You know, according to the folktale narrated by Ekwefi, the birds had a feast in the sky, and the tortoise was invited because there was famine. So even though they knew he's cunning and he's a trickster, you know, but they allowed him, after persuading them, to be part of the party, and they gave him their wings. They contributed wings and feathers to him to make as wings and to join. And we know how the fable ended, that eventually the tortoise, being greedy, took most part of the food, and then the birds were hungry and they detached their feathers, and it was thrown from the sky to the earth, and he broke his shell. So I view this breaking of shell from the Yoruba anthropological standpoint, according to Lawi, 1998. And I also I blended it with Adeoti's critique of African folktale about the tortoise from the satirical standpoint. So my submission is that the tortoise in this folktale, it's a metaphor of Nigeria, the political history of Nigeria, you know, based on some of the occurrences that has happened from the post-independence era, you know, when the whites, after leaving the country, when Nigeria gained independence, so they had balkanized the resources and some of the things that the country owned. And this I see in light of the birds plucking away their feathers, removing their feathers from the tortoise, whom I see as a picture, as a metaphoric picture of Nigeria. So I see this trait of the tortoise as a trickster, not just as a fable, not just as a minute aspect of the novel, but I see it as a picture of the condition, the socio-political condition of Nigeria. And then I also established that the parrot's revenge on the tortoise is a leitmotif of Christian missionaries who institute a new religion in Umuofia using Bible and gun. You know, the parrot goes to the house of the tortoise wife to tell the tortoise wife to bring out cannons, gun, and all the weapons of war that can injure the tortoise. So I view this as a leitmotif of Christian missionaries who institute a new religion in Umuofia using the Bible and gun, the machinery of colonialism. So Okonko's suicide, in view of the tortoise, Okonko read as the tortoise, is balanced by Ngoye's conversion to Christianity and the calculated deception of the tortoise wife. In this regard, the tortoise fracture and Okonko's suicide is an indissoluble metaphor for national degeneration and mediation, where literary artists, agencies, individuals collectively contribute to the process of national recovery in Nigeria. Pointedly, the tortoise splinter or fracture signals a transition of a revolutionary spirit from Umuofia into African literary space ignited by Achebe, the trickster writer whose obligation, apart from entertainment, is pointing the Nigerian society to the desired change. So, summarily, the folktale of the tortoise becomes a platform for me to critique the political history of Nigeria. And some of the experiences in the folktale, you know, it's seen as a metaphor, not just as but a metaphor to corroborate or to satirize the amphitheater and some of the political condition and experiences that Nigeria have had. So this is what I looked at in my paper. So the most important thing is, and the significance of this study is that though Achebe, being an Igbo, he acknowledged the intercultural significance of the trickster, the tortoise, in Gellert War. And he views this tortoise, he views the trickster, he views it in line with the depiction of Eshu, you know, a Yoruba trickster god. So I linked these two figures, I linked them to the picture of Okonkwo as well as Umofia and Nigeria. So just to show that the fracture of the tortoise is a metaphoric picture of the chaos, of the fragments in Nigerian politics. And just as the fable or the folktale is concluded that a powerful medicine man, you know, assisted the tortoise in patching his broken shell. So I view this dynamism of the shell, of the broken shell in the Yoruba culture as a leitmotif, as a metaphor of the fragmentation, of the disintegration of politics in Nigeria, and the need for literary artists, individuals, and everyone to contribute in the rebuilding and in managing institutions. So this is my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I'm very grateful.
Thank you, Professor. Yeah. Chairperson sir, can you allow Professor Srijoni Roy and Professor Tamalika Das to deliver their papers?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, any one of them.
Yeah. Professor Srijoni Roy, Assistant
Professor
Professor.
Srijoni Roy. Well, Professor Srijoni Roy. The paper of her is The Binding Motherhood, reading into the Nigerian woman's mothering experience in Buchi Emetete's second class region and Joys of Motherhood, Nigeria. Again.
Yes. Am I audible now?
Oh, audible, fully audible.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and hello. As Pradip Ranjan Sengupta has introduced in his concept note regarding all the African writers, he has already mentioned that Emecheta holds a very important position as a Nigerian novelist. Now, my paper is named The Binding Motherhood, reading into the Nigerian woman's mothering experience in Buchi Emecheta's Second Class Citizen and the Joys of Motherhood. Now, Buchi Emecheta's fictional space is essentially a world of mothers. The struggling mothers, the hopeful mothers, the failing mothers, the resentful mothers, the unmotherly mothers, and the ghost mothers. Be it the pre-colonial tribal cultural space of Ibuza, or the developing urban metropolis of Lagos, or the multiracial cosmopolitan United Kingdom, women protagonists in Emecheta's novels engage in an existentialist struggle characteristic of the African woman striving to survive in an overtly gender-biased societal setup. Emecheta was quoted saying, I quote Emecheta, I work toward the liberation of women, but I'm not feminist. I'm just a woman, unquote. Now, though she rejects the tag of feminism, Emecheta writes about, and I quote Mari Ume, what it means to be an African woman in an African society, unquote, and thereby projecting the insider's view of which her male compatriots were unaware of with their essentially one-dimensional romanticized images of the African woman, primarily as mother. The Joys of Motherhood, published in 1979, places the protagonist's new ego in the colonized Nigerian context of the 1930s, where she shuttles between her homeland Ibuza and the urban Lagos, where her marriage brings her to. Second Class Citizen, published in 1974, looks at the protagonist Ada's voluntary journey from Lagos to the United Kingdom of the late 1960s in search of a better life. Displacement, adaptation, struggle, and resistance underline both these women's experience. Nuigo's story begins with the traumatic experience of her losing her infant son, which propels her to attempting suicide. She was expelled from her first marriage for not being able to produce a timely heir, and she endures her second husband, whom she otherwise detests for his physical appearance as well as for his status as a colonial servant, with the hope that she might become a mother and therefore prove her worth as a woman to herself, her father, and to her entire tribe. For Ada, a lonely and fatherless child pushed into domestic servitude at her maternal uncle's place, who struggles alone and procures formal education, marriage was a way to find a home. Very soon into their marriages, both Nuigo and Ada understand that their husbands are autocratic, loveless, indolent, and often tyrannical. Husbands are only to be tolerated and provided for as they are fathers of their children. Children, a considerable brood of children, preferably male, are the markers of successful womanhood, not only for the illiterate and rustic Nuigo, but for the educated and working and urban Ada. Now, Igbo women were never confined to their homes in their traditional tribal setup. Though primarily endowed with domestic duties of keeping the house, maintaining children, and providing for the husband, all of them had independent trades and owned kiosks at the local markets, and thereby contributed to the overall financial well-being of the family. When Nuigo moves to Lagos, she banks on her traditionally learned business acumen to start a trade and complement the meager income of her washerman husband. But as she goes on producing more and more children over time, and with her husband jobless or absent most of the time, the entire responsibility of bringing up the children actually falls on the tender shoulders of Nuigo. Not only feeding and clothing her children, but now she needs to provide for their education too, an add-on responsibility that the colonial system brought along, where education of the children must be taken care of if the mother wants to see them succeed. She cannot but question the fairness of this settlement, where the white man's social system demands a docile woman. And though Naife converts to Christianity and embraces that worldview, Nuigo has to be the main provider of the household. As Nuigo goes on working with superhuman fortitude, the only hope that keeps her afloat is that her old age would be happy. Her children, specifically the male ones, are her investments that she hopes to eventually reap benefit from. The irony inherent in the name of the novel becomes gradually prominent as contrary to her naive dreams, her sons decide to leave the country in search of a better future, proclaiming it in no uncertain terms that they are responsible neither for the financial nor the emotional well-being of the mother. The daughters, who always came as a second thought, rather becomes Nuigo's support, but still she dies a lonely and dissatisfied death. Now, Nuigo's resistance after her death, as she becomes the ghost mother of the clan who refuses to bless the people with fertility. The joy, quote unquote joy, that she had to endure of breeding repeatedly, of toiling inhumanly day and night for her children, of premature age and untimely death, Nuigo refuses to pass on to future mothers. Now, coming to second-class citizen, Ada's connection with her children mirrors that of Nuigo's. Ada's predicament still remains that of 1,000 working mothers all over the world. She has to work to run her household with an idle husband and has to worry endlessly about the well-being and safety of her children in a foreign land. The working mother is more often than not characterized as the unnatural mother, who willfully undermines the nurturing responsibilities heaped on her by patriarchy and thereby choosing herself over her children. The dilemma of the working class mother is more acute. For her, work is not a matter of choice, but rather it is a necessity. Ada's position as a well-educated working woman in Lagos, an elite who could afford 4 nannies for her 2 children in her absence, undergoes a sea change as she moves over to the United Kingdom. She is reduced to the status of a second-class citizen, where she battles squalor, disease, and debasement. She detests her unwanted pregnancy caused by the instances of marital rape or her husband's refusal to use the contraception she so desperately procures. both their bodies, Nuigos and others, are actually, they are denied the autonomy over their bodies, even though they are placed 30 years apart from each other. Their being unmotherly mothers become a part of this experience. When Nuigo's seventh child dies at birth, she cannot but wonder that if it was she who unconsciously wished for the death of a child, as she slogged for the upkeep of her existing children. When Ada finds herself pregnant for the fourth time, she opts for abortion, though it goes against her Christian upbringing. As Ada cares for her newborn fourth baby, after quitting work and therefore making Francis take up employment, for the first time she feels what is to be a real housewife. This is what she says. She relaxes, and as she does not have to work both at home and outside, and therefore is happy to what the feminists would come to call downsize. Ada has once vehemently refused to join a clothes factory like other Nigerian women in the United Kingdom when she first came, as she thought it would be an insult to her hard-earned education and status. But now she is happy to be a seamstress as long as she can work part-time and from home with her children around. Ada's change is definitely post-feminist in its edict that women's liberation, the kind the second wave of feminism sought for, actually led to the dabbling of burden on women. Because though women started working outside, men never admitted their share of domestic duties. For these overworked mothers, emancipation sometimes would mean having the choice of going back to the domestic sphere. I conclude. The autobiographical undertones present in Second Class Citizen are apparent at many levels, especially when Ada decides to write the novel named The Bride Price, which is the very name of Emecheta's third novel. The term brainchild gets stuck in Ada's mind, and she cannot forgive Francis's despotic act of burning her manuscript, a willful act of homicide that Francis commits to her figurative offspring. The African woman's act of writing, that too in a foreign language like English, is in itself an act of defiance and self-assertion, an act which, like her ability to create a progeny, gave her the essence of self-worth and groundedness. Being the shielding mother she is, Ada decides to finally leave her husband. With this, one may look back at the dedication page of the Second Class Citizen. Her own 5 children, and I quote, without whose sweet background noises, this book would have not been written, unquote. The skeptical reader cannot but wonder if the use of this oxymoron, the playful juxtaposition of the words sweet and noise, is more potent than it apparently appears. Was it not too much for an African woman like Emecheta, escaping an abusive marriage, single-handedly responsible for the upbringing of her own 5 children, struggling day and night to make ends meet in a racially delineated London society, to be a writer? Did not her multiple pregnancies and recurrent motherly responsibilities undermine her aspirations as a human being? Motherhood, to the end, remains a much contested ground in Emecheta's writing, because the scales measuring profit and loss never get balanced to precision. Thank you.
Thank you, Srijali. Actually, discussing motherhood, we have widely covered the status of women in Africa. And we have shown nicely how mother, wife, and women, particularly how there are how there is joy of motherhood and there obligation, pain, suffering,
Yes.
racial discrimination, etc. etc. Thanks. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Kloproto.
Sir, can you allow Professor Tomalika Das to make her presentation? Sir, we are running
Yes,
short of
Tomalika,
time.
welcome.
Please request the presenters to make the presentation within 8 minutes.
Tomalika Das.
Yeah.
Tomalika Das,
Yes, sir.
welcome. And your
Yes, sir, I'm here.
your paper is
Should I begin?
মানে কি হবে আমার কেটে দিলাম ওই যে হাত কাঁপলো রেকর্ডিংটা আবার গেল রেকর্ডিংটা গেল
PowerPoint presentation visible?
Not visible. You are audible, not visible.
Okay, no. I'm audible, no?
Yes, you are
Yes,
audible.
you're audible.
Fully audible.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
presentation also.
Thank you, sir.
You're sharing the
So
presentation.
today, good afternoon, everybody. I am going to present today my paper on Bulle Soyinka's A Dance of the Forests and Badal Sarkar's Procession, a comparative study in theatricality. Now, first, I begin with the introduction to the two dramatists. Now, these two dramatists, though they belong to two different social realities and two different countries, but still they have certain things in common. The most important being that both of them, they wrote against the establishment, and most importantly, they infused into their dramas the native cultures, the native myths, the native elements in order to make the Western dramatic tradition subverted, and in order to write into the Western dramatic tradition that was practiced during their time. Bulle Soyinka, in his most complex satirical play, A Dance of the Forests, displays his obsession with truth by talking about death, despair, and disillusionment about that await the newborn nation at the time of the highly joyous occasion of its independence. Adrian Roscoe, in Mother is Gold, has said, in a play offered to a nation on the euphoric occasion of its independence, the immediate victim of the satire is that nation itself. In a play ostensibly celebrating a country's birth, the talk is all about death, delusion, and betrayal. An intermingling of traditional and Western elements, the Christian and Yoruba myths, in an aesthetic expression of Soyinka's philosophical ambivalence, which is actually the pivot of the eclecticism of his theatre. The use of ritual proclaims Soyinka's unrelenting obsession with the Ogun myth and its complicated reenactments through ritual. It convincingly proves that he is a mythic imaginator. Now, this concept of ritual is also apparent in the theatre of Badal Sarkar. I would okay, there's some problem. Now, Badal Sarkar was a city man who was born and brought up in Calcutta, the typical middle-class, urban, educated Bengali. He is an amalgamation of various opposing and myriad forces. He set out to establish a theatre known as the Third Theatre. Now, in his Third Theatre, he has brought in the synthesis of the West and also the Indian indigenous theatres. Now, this is Badal Sarkar's Michil. You can see that it is enacted on the open. There is no conception of a stage or no conception of a proscenium, so to say. So his main butt of criticism was with the proscenium theatre. It is either enacted in an open area or in a room, or maybe also in a field. This is the acting area of the procession. So this is a maze-like structure where the characters can go in and out in all directions. It is a third theatre performance. The audience are always inside the play. The imagination of the audience is always in the is always taken into consideration. The central character of this play is Khoka, who symbolizes the countless victims who are silenced by the state. Now, this play is a dramatization of a state-sponsored annihilation. Nietzsche explores the ironical exposures of the social, economic, and historical forces creating crises in society. Now, this is the scenes. These are the scenes from the Dance of the Forests. In the Dance of the Forests, also the interplay of colors, the interplay of the setting, which is very simple, which is minimalistic. So these are the techniques which have been used by both these two dramatists to create something new, to create or to dismantle the Western mode of expression through drama. But the chief point of difference from Wille Soyinka and Badal Sarkar is Wille Soyinka in this production has confined himself to the proscenium. He has used experimentation with scene, with the minimalistic techniques, with stage, everything. But for Badal Sarkar, he has broke open completely from the proscenium in order to reach more and more to the audience. And as he was influenced also by the West, so there is an interplay, or there is a fusion of the West and also the indigenous theaters in his drama, as is noticeable in Nichil. Now, I again come to the Dance of the Forests. In Dance of the Forests, it celebrates Nigeria's independence after the Civil War. Now, infusion of the Yoruba culture and the presence of the characters in the play are significant to defamiliarize the accepted notion of joy or happiness inherent in a freedom struggle. The characters come from 4 different groups. They are the town dwellers, the forest dwellers, characters from the past who have come into the present, and also the element of dance is very significant in this play, because here the characters, the Dutch man tells the living to leave the dead some room to dance. So here, dance represents a mode of expression, and it is closely related to physical expression in the form of dancing. And so dancing represents a very important tool to portray the dramatic endeavor in this play. And in Badal Sarkar, he has used the stage arena, the acting arena, the characters always talk in chorus. There is minimum infusion of, there are no fixed characters. Any character can assume any role in order to prove the universality of existence. So I conclude that both these two dramatists had a kind of goal at breaking down the fourth wall in a dramatic performance, which involved much more participation of the audience to make the drama a live performance, and also the techniques of minimalism and imaginative participation of the audience becomes much more significant, where they can participate in a play, where they can come to a play where maybe previously they were denied existence. Thank you.
Thank you, Komalika, for your illuminating art theatre speech and comparison between Soyinka and Badal Sarkar. The next speaker is Tanvir Sanawaz. Sobrato.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, I am present.
Tanvir Sanawaz is there. Professor Tanvir
Sir, I am
Sanawaz
present.
is there. Yes, he can make his
Yes.
presentation.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is really a glorious day and day of pride for all of us. This is the first time that our college, our department, is organizing such an international level conference. So we are already running behind time. I will not take much time, because from 4 p.m. we have to start our parallel session. I'm going to start my.
Don't be nervous.
Okay, sir.
Your paper is a nervous condition. Continue as long as you can.
Okay, sir.
Hello, Tanvir.
Yes, sir.
Start. Yeah, start.
Sir, can you see?
No, I can see nothing, but can hear you.
Yes, it is visible. Play. Start playing.
Yes.
It is visible. Professor Tanvir Sanawaz, it's visible.
Yes.
Thank you. Start playing,
Start,
please.
Yes, it's playing.
Start.
Professor Shahnawaz, the voice is not audible.
Your voice is audible to me.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And the word of rich African literature is definitely Nervous Conditions by Sitsi Dangaremba. It was ranked in the top 10 of Africa's 100 best books of the 20th century. The book deals with the politics of post-colonial theory, the legacy of rights of women. It is an excellent and exquisite, well thought out work that very subtly offers a journey of vision of an African girl with its well-crafted theme of race, hybridity, colonial education, gender and cultural hegemony. The novel illustrates the nervous conditions, the perturbations, the traumas of the post-colonial nations that torments us still. In Tambu or Tambuzai, the protagonist of the novel and one of the females of a family, African women can see their own life. They can obviously relate their own lives, their own conditions with her. If at home or dislocated, who struggles daily war against their shifting world with a mixture of firmness, confusion, and kindness. Famous post-colonial theorist Frantz Fanon, in his seminal work Black Skins, White Marks, argumented this issue that becomes relevant in this study. Frantz Fanon argumented that to passively adopt the white master's culture is to allow the age-old African legacy to be replaced. This basically forces the black man to passively carry a white mask. At the same time, being a black Rhodesian woman, Tambu, in addition, is a woman in a ghastly misogynic society. She is to live with the autocratic attitude of the typical patriarchal system and the hardships and injustices involved with it. Hence, being a woman for Tambu is actually worthless because everyone in her home state treats her like worthless object. In this critical paper, focus has been made how an ordinary rural girl of Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, breaks off the chains of the subjugated society that try to marginalize and subjugate women doubly, and also how she asserts her voice. It's a visionary journey from voiceless to voice, from anonymity to individualism. Tambu was born a girl and thus faces a fundamental disadvantage since traditional African social practice dictates that the oldest male child is deemed the future head of the family. All of the family's resources are poured into developing his abilities and preparing him to lead and provide for his family, for his clan. When Namo, the elder brother, dies, the tragedy is all the more deeper since no boy exists to take his place. Tambu steps into the role of future provider, yet she is saddled with the prejudices and limitations that shackled most African girls of a time, of a generation. So her fight for an education and a better life is compounded by her gender. So gender inequality and sexual discrimination form the background of all the female characters' lives in the novel. Here, inequality is as infectious as a disease, a kind of crippling attitude that kills ambitions, that kills desires, that crushes their spirits and discourages them from supporting and rallying future generations and other female relatives. One important theme of the novel is obviously colonialism, the Western colonialism, and as a result, Tambu experiences the Western style education setting and the missionary school where she reads. Both provides and represents privileged opportunity and enlightenment despite By Nini's strong objections, Tambu knows the only hope she has of lifting her family out of poverty is education. So the mission school poses threats as well. Western institutions and systems of thought may really alter native Africans who are subjected to them. Nyasha, her cousin, who has seen firsthand the effect of being immersed in a foreign culture, grows suspicious of an unquestioning acceptance of the post-colonial colonial education. She fears that the dominating culture may eventually stifle, cripple, limit, or eradicate the long-established native culture of Rhodesia or Zimbabwe. In other words, she fears that colonialism may force a kind of assimilation. The character's vibes are already entrenched in a national identity that reflects the synthesis of African and colonialist elements. The characters struggle to confront and integrate the various social and political influences that shape their lives, forms the backbone and central conflict of nervous conditions. So, I will sum up that Tambu was considered an other, yet all such obstacles were not enough to check her indomitable spirit of the protagonist, be it external or internal. Her cousin Nyasha, suffering from tremendous psychic and physical disorder, found refuge in Tambu. She suffered from bulimia and other eating disorders. So when Tambu realized that her education was a branch of the colonial system that sought to take her into the mold, it showed that she learned to think critically and accepted that not all education is good. At this point, she started writing this novel, The Nervous Conditions, and Tambu Tambudzai is the mouthpiece of the novelist Tsitsidangaremba herself, as it is a semi-autobiographical novel. Tsitsidangaremba herself, and she tries to make readers know about her journey from anonymity to individualism and her exquisite tale of quest, contest, and conquest. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Tanvir.
Thank you, sir.
And you mentioned this very novel, but we know that she was also a very great film producer. You know it. Producer, and her films and books, like Two Dramatists, they work simultaneously for the liberation of women in Zimbabwe. Okay, thank you for your paper. Next speaker, Subroto.
Yes, sir.
With the next speaker, Subroto.
Sir, yeah, sir, no more speaker for your session, sir. Sir, can we move on to the next session, next technical session?
Okay, thank
Should
you.
we start our presentation?
Hello, sir.
Sir, I'm giving up for the next session and wishing the success for the next session as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Purnendu Kumar Bhattacharya, for giving us this valuable time. Professor Purnendu Kumar Bhattacharya has been there supporting us since long.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I'm always with you, sir.
Yes, sir. With 40 years of teaching experience, he's a doyen in his field of academics. We had this honor of his presence. Thank you, Professor Dr. Purnendu Kumar Bhattacharya.
One word. Up till now, the discussion has been concentrated and confined within the very literature of the very regions of Africa. Almost 55 countries and 2,000 languages. But not a single paper has I seen so far on the orature. Because in your seminar paper, there was the African literature, orature and culture. All our speakers have dwelt on African literature and culture. But none of them have dwelt upon the very orature. Yes, they were interesting aspects. And I think that the next papers will perhaps concentrate on this very orature, which is an important part of the literary tradition of Africa, because most of the literature of the world have come out of orature. Okay, I hope that all the success for the very seminar, this interesting international seminar. I am proud of it. Thank you, sir, for your element.
Thank you, Professor Bhattacharya. We are now moving on to the next session. The next session will be chaired by Professor Chandra Shukla Hajra. Professor Chandra Shukla Hajra, she had a teaching experience of 32 years and she had been a principal of 2 colleges, one being Krishnanagar Women's College and the second being Kachrapada College. And she had been a visiting faculty of the Department of English, UG and PG Studies. for the last 5 years of Rishi Bankim Chandra College. May I now request Professor Chandra Shukla Hajra to chair the next session and invite the speakers. Madam, please.
Thank you, Shubhabruto. Good afternoon to everybody. So we are to start with the speakers. In my list, as it was provided to me, the first speaker is Dr. Momtajul Islam. The name of the first speaker is Dr. Momtajul Islam, Professor English Language Institute, King Abdulaziz University, Jeddah, Saudi Arabia.
Hello everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you. So Shubhabruto, can we start? Shubhabruto, can we start?
Yes, Professor, voice is clear, audible. Sir, you can start, sir.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for giving me this opportunity, but I am just a lecturer, not a professor yet. Anyway, it has been an enthralling experience so far today. My topic is certain indigenous societal limitations and their exploitation by the colonial invaders in Chinua Achebe's Arrow of God. Now, since there is a time constraint, I try to be as brief and quick as possible. I try to look into some of the prevalent native weaknesses in the native Igbo society as represented in Achebe's one of the famous novels, Arrow of God. It's part of his trilogy. Things fall apart, God, and no longer at ease. But also try to highlight how a new native class is being created cautiously, deliberately by the colonial rulers so that they can create tension between the native Igbo people and perpetuate their presence and dominate the native Igbo land. And I'd also, if time permits, I'd also try to focus on different layers of hegemony and domination that were prevalent within the native society long before colonizers came to this land. But how these colonizers, noticed such weaknesses and exploited them for their own benefit. I hope you like this. So quickly, cultural hegemony. All of us know about cultural hegemony. It's basically a domination of one section over the rest in a society, or one state over another. But there is another type of hegemony as well, as Antonio Gramsci, a very famous pioneer of the concept of cultural hegemony, says that it's not only the direct control, it's also controlling the mindset, the psyche of the marginalized people, and to make them believe that, yes, we are supposed to be dominated by the ruling class. I'd like to quote him here. And he says that subordinate section of a society, I quote, consent to their own domination by ruling class as to being simply forced or coerced into accepting inferior positions, unquote. So, what Achebe does in his writings is he tries to represent Africa and its people with all its complexities, different layers of, society and their presence, their strengths and weaknesses to the rest of the world. Because before Achebe, in Western writing, Africa was represented as just like a crowd, devoid of any complexities or individual identity, as if just like a herd of animals. But that's what Achebe questioned. No, look, we have a society like any other society in the world. We have our shortcomings, our limitations, and strengths like any other society. So don't consider us as a homogeneous entity. So Achebe tries to be an impartial observer of the native society and tradition. Okay, so let's talk about some native weaknesses, indigenous weaknesses already prevalent in the Igbo society, which is the backdrop of all his novels. For example, the native Igbo people had a strong belief in the presence of supernatural powers in the native society and the religion. When the colonial forces came to this land in the form of Christian missionaries, they tried to grab this kind of weakness. They also noticed that There were social outcasts in the native society. They are not a creation after the colonial experience. They're already there. These kind of weaknesses are already there in the native society, but they were being exploited by the colonial forces for their own benefit. For example, the mothers of twins, people with leprosy and other diseases were considered evil in the Igbo society. That's why they were marginalized. There were societies within the Igbo society. For example, the most powerful society in the Igbo society was the society of elders, who took care of all the legalities, gave verdicts, make decisions. And the most marginalized section of the society was the young generation, the youth. They were not given any noteworthy responsibilities, so they felt left out. So these people, the social outcasts, these marginalized young generation, and those people who did not believe much into the practices going on in the society were targeted by these Christian missionaries. There was a rift and lack of understanding between different sections in the society, between the young generation and the elder generation. And the colonizer forces targeted these people. They told them, look, you're already being cultivated in a society. Why don't you come and join Christianity? And you will be as equal as anybody else in our religion. And that was fascinating to these marginalized people. So such sidelined people of the native society found a seemingly better alternative in Christianity, as they were not considered unwanted anymore in the new religion. And with this, with this kind of native Igbo people, the Christian missionaries were able to form a new native Igbo section, that is Igbo middle class. But what these people do later, subsequently, they work just as an army of the colonial masters, so that they could perpetuate their domination, their hegemony on the Igbo people. They were just nothing more than negotiators, nothing more than puppets in the hands of the colonial masters, so that colonizers could control, administer their rules on the Igbo land without any barriers, any obstacles, be it linguistics, be it traditional, or be it cultural. But subsequently, these people started fighting against their own brothers and sisters. When these new converts joined Christianity, their psyche were being brainwashed. They are being told, look, everything about your erstwhile society and people is bad. For example, in Arrow of God, there is one native Christian missionary. His name is John Goodcountry, if I remember correctly. And he instigates other native converts that, look, everything about your previous religion and people is bad. Go and destroy them. And that's what they did. These new converts go on, destruction spree. They destroy most of the local shrines, kill the sacred animals of the native Igbo religion. And that raised tension. And that contributed to a fierce, violent attack between these group of people. And from family, after the colonial invasion, from family, they become foes. There was an increasing amount of hostility between each other. I'd like to give another example of divide and rule policy as well. There were two villages. The main protagonist of this novel is Eziulu, the chief priest of Godulu, who had his own personal limitations and suffering and conflicts when he came in contact, with the rest of the society. So Eziulu's village, Umuaro, and its neighboring village, Okteri, always had some tension, but they never came to the fore before colonial invasion in such a huge, situation, a huge magnanimity. What the colonial forces did, I'll give you one example. They were constructing a road between different villages in the Igbo land, and they were hiring the village people for the construction. They paid everybody, everyone who worked for them except the people of Umuaro, and that enraged them. That, you know, and they were fierce. They said, why the people of Okperi got paid for the same work that we did, and we are not paid even a penny. That created further tension, which ultimately resulted in a kind of fighting between the villages. So all these native weaknesses and shortcomings, limitations were cleverly, cautiously, deliberately used by the colonial rulers for their own benefits. I'd like to quote here one of the main characters from Things Fall Apart, Mr. Oberika, you know, Okonkwo's friend. He says, I think that summarizes the whole thing. I quote him. How do you think that we can fight when our own brothers have turned against us? The white man is very clever. He came quietly, peaceably with religion, and we were amused at his foolishness and allowed him to stay. Now he has won our brothers, and our clan no longer act like one. He has put a knife on the things that held us together, and we have fallen apart. Unquote. So before I conclude, I would like to also talk about Simon Gikandi, a very famous critic of Chinua Achebe. He's of the view that Achebe usually examined native African social and cultural practices at the time of colonial onslaught in terms of pre-existent inner contradictions and ambivalence, and does not simply applaud it as an, I quote him, unquestioned authority. Achebe himself, in one of his essays, I think the name is The Role of the Writer in a New Nation, admits, I quote, we cannot pretend that our past was long, technicolor idyll. We have to admit that like other people's past, ours had its good as well as bad sides, I unquote. But these bad sides, these negative things in the Igbo society were deliberately exploited, manipulated by the colonial rulers so that they could firmly establish their control in all strata of native society, native Igbo society. Do I have any time left?
No.
Oh, thank you very much. I hope you like
it. Running behind time, and we have 6 speakers.
Okay.
In the
so I'll end.
No, you are very illuminating, but I'm sorry, we have to.
Okay, no problem. I can understand. I hope that people liked it. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mumtajul.
Thank you very much. Thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. Most of the people cannot pronounce it rightly. Thank you very much.
For your illuminating, logical analysis, threadbare discussion of the novels of Chinua Achebe from a different angle. I think those who have heard your lecture will be more interested in reading his novels in a new way, with a new outlook, how to discuss it. Thank you.
Very much. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. Thank you.
So our next speaker is Dr. Pritesh Chakraborty, Assistant Professor, Acharya Sukumar Sen Mahavidyalaya, Bardhaman. Dr. Pritesh Chakraborty, are you present? Yes.
Yes, I am present.
Yes.
I think I am audible.
Shubhabrata, we can start with Pritesh. Yes.
Okay, all right. So
you can start with your lecture.
Yeah, all right. So I'd like to make a presentation. Let's see if it works just for a minute. So is the PPT on the screen?
Yes, visible. Yes, it is visible.
Okay, great. So my presentation will be on the shades of dark, that is representations of Africa in the comic books of Nagraj. Now, Kaur and Iqbal attest in their book, Adventure Comics and Youth Cultures in India, that when foreign travel was limited, if not impossible, comic books enabled a canvas for what Homi Bhabha terms vernacular cosmopolitanism. It became a form of simulated tourism well before virtual reality became a vernacular reality. In the pre-internet and pre-cable TV days, one of the most favored modes of indoor entertainment of children and adolescents were the comic books. While the usual candidate for accolades and accreditation was the Amar Chitra Katha, most of them were published in English.
Hello.
Hindi-speaking belts, yes.
Hello.
Anything? Any issues?
Yes. Go on. Dr. Chakravarti, go on, please.
Okay, sorry for the interruption. The Hindi-speaking belts of the North and Northwestern India favored the regionally produced Hindi comics. These comics had many superheroes in them. This paper chooses the Hindi comics produced by Raj Comics, and the time that I have chosen is from 1989 to 1984. Within Raj Comics, the focus will be on the character called Nagraj and his exploits and adventures. It will be in these comics that we will try to analyze the representation of Africa and African people in general. Such issues have been selected where Nagraj is seen in the African environs interacting with the African people, while we will try to point out and analyze cases of stereotyping, reductive and otherwise. We will also try to highlight the representations that subvert this stereotype consciously or unconsciously. Now, colonialism is not just an event in the world history, but has approached the condition of a world. Not only the colonizers, but the erstwhile colonized, like us, have adopted their way of seeing things. We have been infected by the viral gaze of the oppressors. Both Africa and India have a colonial past, and there are many similarities in the way we react to politics of representations and carry out the same. In its initial foray, the colonizers were often confronted by their enlightened country people about the inhuman exploitation they, the colonizers, perpetrated on the natives. The colonial masters responded by saying that the natives were subhuman and hence the standards of humanity does not apply to them. Hence was born the white man's burden to alleviate the subhuman native to the condition of humanity. Stereotyping the natives of the colonies was an easy way out of the critique of humanitarians against human rights violations, though there were hardly any hard and fast guidelines regarding human rights then. This practice of reducing the native or the other to the condition of the subhuman or inhuman unfortunately continued way after the colonization was over. In fact, the ideas set by the colonizers are still attested to be true today. This fixating of the images of the people of Africa, Asia, and Latin America was and is carried out through several media like movies, literature, adverts, etc. These media have often been challenged by the crusaders for racial justice. However, there is a niche subculture which has been perpetuating these stereotypes right under the noses of human rights watchdogs. This medium is the comic books. What is more distressing is the fact that this stereotyping is done almost unconsciously. Further, this image production and sustenance is carried out in a literature that was supposed to be for the children. The images that were consumed by the children could become permanent since these were hardwired into their impressionable brains. Now, I would like to present the first slide. Okay, here's the first slide, and this is taken from a comic book named The Blood Tribe, or the Khuni Kabila, as it was called in Hindi. And here we find the hero or the superhero, Nagraj, green color skin, is tying or untying the natives present in the image. Of course, he's untying the natives, and this image is resonant with the image of the savior from the outside, which the colonizers had often said that they were. America still claims itself to be a democratizing force to the Middle East and into Africa. And here, Nagraj also does the act of freeing the natives who have been captured by a warlord, by a white person who has gotten control over the particular area in which Nagraj is operating at this point in time. He goes with his friend who he has untied in the earlier image to a hotel to stay. And here what we find in the comic book, which says that black dogs are not allowed. So this is reminiscent of our own images of humiliation at the hands of the Europeans. So there is much common, which is much common between what the Africans were facing and what we had faced, and there is a honest representation of the same, albeit a few decades later, in the naive medium of entertainment called comic books. However, we must pay attention to this image where the distinction between the color of the guard who asks them to leave and of the superhero is hardly distinguishable. Now, comics just does not communicate through the words that are written in the panel, but also through color. Now, this is interesting because we don't find any distinction between the color of these two characters who are standing opposite to each other. In another comic book called Turanga, where Nagraj entangles with a dreaded warlord in Tanzania, and he is doing yet another act of freeing. He is doing yet another act of untying, and he's loosening the manacles that keep the people tied. However, in another image, we find that divided by the Europeans as they were divided in India. It was, in the case of India, it was caste and petty mutual princely squabbles. In Africa, as Fano points out, that when the nation was born, the nation was superseded by tribe and the clan. So here, the general, the ruler of the particular land where Nagraj is present, has divided the community, has divided the race into two tribes, and they are fighting against each other. Nagraj is fighting against those who are what we can call as the complicit. Now, here again in this image, Nagraj is punishing two apparently tribal people, and this image is in itself a kind of a damning image where the white-skinned, if you can look at the face of Nagraj, he is white-skinned, but we have also to look at the skin color of Nagraj in general, which is green. Now, what I have observed is that it does not matter if you are black, brown, green, orange, or whatever. You are not European unless you are white. You are not a colonizer unless you are white. So in this case, it creates a platform of ambiguity. It creates an opportunity of ambiguity, that as to how we can interpret this green-colored, white-skinned person hitting black-skinned people. Now, this is again something which is what Fano had said, that when people are called names in terms of their skin color, they use it as an insult. And in this image, this character accompanied by Nagraj, and this character is beaten up by Nagraj, and then this character paints the white person black and calls him a black person as an insult.
Please, Dr. Chakraborty, please try to wrap up. Please try to wrap up.
Okay, all right. One of the basic images that I wanted to point from our own comic books and graphic novels is this image, which has been taken from the River of Stories, where the same kind of exploitation and internal colonization goes on. However, it does not goes on without any kind of resistance. The resistance is provided by the native forces attacking the white forces and ultimately triumphing over the tyranny. So what I have found out is that there are images which are damning, which are stereotypical, which are reductive in comic books, but comic books also have the ability to create certain complexes in the young minds, which can be used later to create some positive ideas and images, both of India and Africa in them. So thank you for your time and your attention. I hope I could make myself presentable. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Chakraborty, for your beautiful, wonderful speech. We went back to our own childhood and we were thinking about those comics which really helped a lot in preparing our mind. Yes, there are evil as well as good, and ultimately most of the comic books ends with the triumph of the good, and thereby perhaps we have still now being human. So many thanks to you, Dr. P.K. Chakraborty. As we are running out of time, and being an ex-principal, I am always try to be punctual. So our next speaker is Henrietta Okafor, lecturer, Department of English, University of Nigeria. Henrietta has been there from the very morning. This young, I think she's young, still young girl, very junior to me. We are very hopeful to learn from her, to listen to her speech. African writers and homosexuality. Presence is not a signifier of acceptance. Homosexuality is a new term, though not very new. After the publication of Aug2020 report in 1957, it became regular in England. Before that, homosexuality was a taboo in England and as well as in all other countries. So this is a new aspect. We are eagerly looking forward to listen to her speech. Yes, Henrietta Okafor, you please start.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Can everybody hear me? Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can
hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can
My
hear
name is Henrietta Okafor. Okay, thank you. My name is Henrietta Okafor. I'm a lecturer in the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. My topic is entitled African Writers and Homosexuality. Presence, not a signifier of acceptance. In recent times, there have been arguments over the presence or absence of homosexuality in Africa. And if we have been following the trend, we would have known that by now, many African writers shy away from the topic for obvious reasons. In my introduction, I stated that African literature has seen different epochs and experienced all kinds of writings and writers, to say the least. It has undergone different levels of transformation. But one thing is sure, though, that African writers are indeed committed and protest writers. And for them, there is always something to protest about. In the words of the renowned novelist Chinua Achebe, he stated assertively that, I quote, "It is impossible to write anything in Africa without some kind of commitment, some kind of message, some kind of protest." African writers have used their writings to project what they believe in, like nationalism, tradition, and communal living. And they also kick against those things they dislike, like colonialism, imperialism, apartheid, slavery, and bad governance. Achebe buttresses his point further. In fact, according to him, I should say that all writers, whether they are aware of it or not, are committed writers. The whole pattern of life demanded that one should protest, that you should put in a word for your history, your tradition, your religion, and so on. African writers have explored different themes under gender and sexuality, such as masculinity, womanhood, female representation, gender roles, and even feminism. But it is of homosexuality in Africa did not make their priority list. And this is the gap in scholarship that my work is out to fill. Same-sex relationships and unions are so criminalized in Africa that characters withdraw into their closet for safety. There have been discussions and arguments for years over the presence or absence of homosexuality in Africa. A great majority of African writers, on their part, have, through their works, vigorously refuted the existence of homosexuality in Africa. Earlier writers of African literary works clearly dissociated themselves from homosexual themes, like Wang Wood, a recalcitrant child who keeps bringing dishonor to the family and exposing it to content and ridicule. Many African writers tend to believe that the only normal or approved sexuality is heterosexuality. To them, sexual attraction and romantic relationships should exist between individuals of opposite sex, that is, male and female, and not male and male or female and female or any other. Most African literary texts represent homosexuality rather negatively and unsympathetically. In recent times, however, A few African works have represented it sympathetically by explaining the homosexual tendency of such characters as a biological phenomenon. On the whole, it is obvious that majority of the African writers really frown at homosexuality. Hence, the popular claim that it is a Western construct, a taboo, it is on Africa and totally absent in Africa. They, however, suggest that it might be found elsewhere, but certainly not in the African continent. The back and forth argument over the existence of homosexuality in Africa has propelled this research work as an attempt to set the record straight. This paper has its focus on the presence of homosexuality in Africa. Whether it receives ovation or applause or suffers ridicule and disdain is yet to be seen. My theoretical framework is hinged on queer literary theory. Queer used to be a word, a derogatory word used for addressing lesbians and homosexuals before 1980. The term queer theory was coined by an Italian feminist called Teresa de Lauretis in 1990 during a special issue of Differences. She organized a conference at University of California, Santa Cruz. Queer theory emanated from critical and cultural contexts like feminism, post-structuralism, and several movements. It seeks to challenge the binaries, assert that there is no yardstick for normal, and then tries to reconcile the relationship between gender and sexuality. Queer theory is suitable for textual analysis and reading of texts with queer themes such as this, as it aids the researcher in identifying homosexual perspectives. Now, the predominant portrayal of homosexuality in African literature. Zara Nesbitt Ahmed and Stephen Omori talk about the predominant portrayal of same-sex relationship in Africa as un-African and Western and a Western import, because majority of the writers portray it as such. Works like Wole Soyinka's Interpreters, Kofi Awuno's This Earth, My Brother, Aikwe Ama's 2000 Seasons, and Idols and Sister Killjoy told the popular line of projecting homosexuality not just as an African, but also as a Western import or behavior foisted on Africa by her colonial masters in their wake. In Dili Bonyama's Sex is a Nigger's Game also, the white races describe at length the extreme virility of black men. In Jude Dibia's Working with Shadows, the ethnic nuances are too clear as Ada wonders how it is even possible for an African to be gay. She couldn't imagine her husband being gay, but the proof was there that the young man is actually gay. In her thoughts, I quote, Adrian was a Nigerian, an African man. Being gay was certainly not in the African culture. The whole idea was so foreign, so unnatural. This was a thing everyone knew somehow existed within the African society. But the probability of it being so close to home was something she never imagined. The shift depictions of homosexuality in African literature portray homosexuality as something totally unheard of in Africa and totally un-African. To them, if it exists at all, if it actually exists, then it must be a result of contact with the West. Noah, in Soyinka's Interpreters, commits suicide because Golda, the African American, made sexual advances at him. This is to show the abject disdain that Africans are presented as having towards homosexuality. In Maddie's play, Big Berin, the grandmother inquires about the meaning of homosexuality, which she finds strange. In her words, homosexuality, waiting be that. In Mariam Abbas' Scarlet Song, there is visible tolerance of homosexuality as Yaye Kadi observes that her neighbor's effeminate son is probably going to be a Jiguin. That is a gigolo. Kaya Makele's explores in her story the story of immigrants who prefer to establish sexual affairs with boys, making out with them instead of making out with their own wives. Christopher Kibo in the Miss V explores the sexual affair between Gilgamesh and Second Self. Many scholars like Daniel Vignal in 1983, Chris Danton in 1989, Gregory Woods 1994, Guarab Desai, and Juliana Makushi have explored the representation of homosexuality in Africa. and arrived at almost the same conclusion, which is that majority of African writers presented homosexuality negatively or as a Western construct because they believe that it is totally un-African. Queer readings of Working with Shadows and My Kaluli Prince, King and Slave. Dibia tells his story from a participant's point of view, as can be seen in the way he x-rayed the workings of the minds of the gay characters. He expertly explains Adrian's homosexuality as a biological phenomenon, even as he traces it from infanthood to adulthood. Ebele, that's the name in that work, is Ebele. Ebele looked chain of people ahead of him, and he found himself reciting in his heart, "Ringa, ringa, roses, a pocket full of roses." He loved that in circles, singing and chasing shadow. But he had been told that he was not supposed to like that game. It was not a game that he is supposed to play, and he was often laughed at when he played this game with the girls. After today, he will not have to play that game again. He will be a new person. That's page 45. Adrian is portrayed as a boy who is constantly in the company of girls, as he prefers playing their girly games to the more masculine ones his brothers engaged in, and he cries so easily like girls. His sympathy for same-sex relationship is also visible as he appeals to the readers, and he also appeals to their conscience and emotion to be sympathetic to people of same sex. Abdul and his gay partner in the work could not care less what society think of them. They are so in love that they savor each other's company more than anything else. They hold hands and touch each other like a man would his female partner. Adrian on his part knows that he is a homophobic society and tried his best to live up to the society's expectation of a man in his position, while depriving himself of his kind of pleasure, suppressing his innermost feelings and attraction for the opposite sex, for the same sex. Adrian had always known that he's gay, though initially he didn't know what it was called. As far back as when he was a boy and battled with another boy he knew. Adrian had not thought about that he was gay. He knew this ever since he started having sexual urges as a child. He had always known he was different from his brothers and other boys. At the age of 7, he knew when he shared a bath with a friend who spent the night in his place. His mother had banished them to the bathroom to clean up before dinner. And since it was customary for 2 kids to bathe together, there had been no problem jumping into the bathtub with Ekene. As they both sponged each other's back amidst laughter and squeals, he felt some closeness to Ekene that was not entirely platonic. There was no name for it then as a child, but as he grew up, experiencing this feeling for other boys and men, he knew the word for it. He was homosexual, gay. From every indication, Adrian, Dibia's main homosexual character, suppresses his emotions, unlike Abdul, who succumbs to his feelings and satisfies his cravings. Adrian is surprised that Yahya, who is married, does not hesitate to declare his gayness, unlike him. In Henry M. Stanley's My Kalulu Prince, King and Slave, on the other hand, it is a quality historical work that predates colonialism in Africa, going by the time of publication. The choice of this particular work is because it proves that homosexuality has been in existence for a while, because this particular work was published in 1870. It is a homosexual story that reveals the strange behavior between Kalulu and Selim.
Professor Okafor, please wrap up. Please wrap up.
Okay. Of this, in the case of this particular work, they were free to hug and serve each other's company, unlike what we have in Jude DBS Working with Shadows, where Adrian remained in his closet until he was exposed. Discussion of findings. It is apparent from the queer reading of the selected novels that homosexuality has been in Africa for a very long time, and the custodians of African culture distance themselves from it because it works against everything they believe. However, Taiwo Olorutumba or just asserts that the presence of homosexuality in Africa today is beyond denial. What seems to be an issue is its antecedents. the evidence of history, of culture, and of language. Conclusion, it can be concluded, therefore, that the continual denial of the existence of homosexuality in Africa is an abject rejection by Africa and their writers. The perceived presence of homosexuality in Africa and the perceived presence of homosexuality in Africa to Africans and their writers do not signify acceptance. Rather, they choose to reject it with every fiber of their being. A recent generation of African writers is trying to say that homosexuals are human beings and should be left to exist peacefully with others in the continent. But as far as African writers are concerned, there is nothing like homosexuality in Africa because they do not want it, therefore they deny its existence. Thank you very much for your time. God bless you.
Thank you, Professor Henrietta Okafor. Thank you for your illuminating speech on homosexuality. It's happening, its narration or not being absent in African writers does not mean that there is no such thing. Even in India, I think the scenario is there are not many Indian novels or stories speaking highly of homosexuality. So thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you
we
so
are running
much.
out of time, so I cannot give you much time. Okay. Our next speaker is Professor Hindol Pali, Department of English, Rashtraguru Surendranath College, Barakpur. Hindol, you are present.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Ma'am, can you listen to me?
Yes, I can listen to you. I think
can you see me?
You can start with your speech, please.
Yeah,
Your speech was
Sure,
on first day at school gone horribly wrong, exploring social alienation in legal alliance by Crystal Butungi.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Yeah. So the title of my paper is First Day at School Gone Horribly Wrong, Exploring Social Alienation in the short story, The Legal Alien. Now the year 1962, it was a very important year in the history of Uganda, because in this year Uganda got its independence. Now, if we take a casual look, at the history of the political history of Uganda, we can see there are multiple references of bloodshed, murder, death. But what happened? In 1970s, after they got their independence, it was completely unprecedented. The chief architect of this gore face was a person who was widely known as Butcher of Uganda. His name was Idi Amin. Idi Amin was the president. Okay, he was the president who orchestrated, according to the government report, the mass murder of more than 3 million people. He has a fetish of innovating ways to kill people. There is a legend that once he threw more than 4,000 people, disabled men and women, into a pond full of crocodiles. Now, of course, ostracized by fear, some Ugandan families, they were considering the option of going out of this country. And finally, a small population, they managed to find a safe passage. They went to places such as UK, USA, and Australia. But they always have a desire to make a return to their own land if ever everything falls into place. Now, their long cherished dream finally came true in 1979 once this reign of terror came to an end when this regime was disrupted. So finally, this community, the small community, the exiled community, they make a return. However, after return, they explore or they discover, they experience an invisible net of separation, a wall of separation between them, the exiled ones, and the one who chooses not to leave the land even at that horrific time. Now, the story that I'm going to talk about, Legal Alien, it explores that tension. It revolves around a little girl. That girl whose parents had left the country at the time of Amin's regime, and the girl was born there, brought up there. When she was 9 years old, she made a return along with her family to Uganda. In Australia, she was already in grade 2, but here in Uganda, she had to be readmitted to a local school. Now here comes her experience of first day in the school. The moment she enters the classroom, she was shocked to find more than 100 students jostling together in such small space. In an Australian school, in the Australian classroom, there are ample space and not more than 20 to 30 students are there. Then she looks around and she finds there was no carpet on the floor. There was no separate desk for the teachers. There was no sleeping corner. There was no refrigerator to keep her food there. No, 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 no. Now this monstrous sense of nothingness, it kind of hits her badly. She asked her teacher where she's supposed to sit. Her teacher makes her sit beside another girl whose name is Lizzie. Now the moment this new girl tries to sit beside Lizzie, Lizzie is pushing away, trying to make distance from this new girl. Lizzie's attitude towards this new girl is highlighting the fact how this community who have chosen to stay back in their land, what hatred, what abhorrence they have for the ones who have gone and now returned. Throughout the day, nobody hardly speaks a word with this new girl. Things changed dramatically almost at the fag end of the class. What happened? There was an English class. The English teacher came in and she started to ask the students to produce their homework. Now, understandably, this new girl, she could not produce the homework because it's her first day in the class. But the teacher, probably failing to remember so many students without listening any explanation, she started beating her up. Now, once the class is finished, all the other class, who so long maintain a kind of a silence, now they all come together to have a word of comfort, to have a word of consolation with this new girl. Because getting beaten up by their teachers, it's a part of their regular experience. Now they feel the new girl who comes from outside, who is a stranger, an alien, now probably she is doctrinated. Now probably she is baptized by fire. Now probably she is one of them. However, the new girl, she is completely shaken up because nothing of that sort in a day in Australia where giving physical punishment to a student is legally prohibited. So her first day at school goes horribly wrong and she develops a kind of an apathy towards the school, towards her friends, towards the society at large. And as that mastered the local language, she cannot speak. She understands, but she can't speak the mother tongue. So every time she's out there in a market or in a shop, she always feels threatened. She always feels people are staring at her, laughing at her, showing that she can't speak in her own mother tongue. Now the story fast forwards. This girl has grown up. She is looking for an opportunity to do masters from an Australian university. Of course, her dreamland. And she gets the opportunity. Now she is desperate to get her visa. She is literally running from pillar to post to complete all the formalities of the visa. And when she is doing all this, she remains happening. Right there on the road, a huge political demonstration is going on. Her country once again.
The people and their language. Igbo people are basically found in the southeast of Nigeria, in the states like Anambra, Abia, Ebonyi, Enugu, parts of Delta, Rivers, and even Kogi. Then when we talk about Proverbs, they have both surface and underlying meanings. And some Proverbs contain both positive and negative meanings as well. So many works have been done on the area of Proverbs. Some have carried out researches in the area of compilation and analysis. Omoyowa 2017 attests to the fact that the noting of proverb can be used in negative sense rather than positive sense. It can be used in both ways, both positive and negative, depending on the occasion that triggers a proverb. It can be deduced that context plays a major role in determining the interpretation of proverbs. Proverbs are very powerful in the expression of human mind They are employed by literary writers, as well as in live discourses, as vehicles for encouragement, praise, satire, even in dispute resolution and admonition and others. According to Nwachukwu Agbada 2002, culture-vast members of the society embellish their speeches with proverbs, not just for oratory, so for didactic purposes, implying that there are several reasons for deploying proverbs in the society. It has also been observed that proverbs sometimes are misappropriated, both by literary writers and even in live discourses. And this is one of the motivations, the main motivation for this study, for embarking on this study. This study sets out to examine the interpretation and misinterpretations of proverbs among the Igbo people of Nigeria, with a view to finding out such proverbs that are often misinterpreted, the reasons behind the misinterpretation, and the implication of such misinterpretation in the society, and to profile the way forward. Then data for this study are from Achebe's No Longer At Ease and live discourses. Then somebody will ask, why no longer at ease, since the proverbs there are English-based? The rationale behind the use of the proverbs in No Longer At Ease, in spite of the fact that the proverbs are written in English, due to the fact that some of the proverbs in the fiction are clear evidence of misappropriations. And this will help in validating the claims in this study, thereby underscoring the essence of this work. According to Chandra Shukla, who calls Achebe a proverbalizer, he observes that Achebe, by bastardizing the tense form of the ilu, that is the proverb, and vulgarizing its meaning, attempts to prove the validity of African tradition by establishing a link with the present moment. Achebe's use of proverbs in the novel is an attempt to secure a place for orality in the written tradition. Then, therefore, Achebe deploys proverbs to remind his readers of losses affected by colonial modernity, the loss of stable order of traditional oral society. So, we go to the main, the data. We have presented the data in two forms. One, the ones from Achebe's No Longer At Ease, and the one from live discourses. We just cite few examples because of our time. We look at No Longer At Ease. One reading through that novel, we observe that the members of Umuofia Progressive Union expresses their reservation about helping Obi in the bribery case because the crime has already been proved and helping him would only be a waste of money and resources. When a member of the union opened this way, his opinion was not actually taken. He was told that Obi's foolishness can be discussed later, thereby employing one of the Igbo proverbs that says the fox must be chased away first. After that, the hen might be warned against wandering into the bush. I take it in Igbo. A-na-ebu ụzọ achụpụ mfu tupu abara ọkụkọ mba ihe o jiri bara baa ọhịa. So they didn't say the crime Obi has committed. Not actually that as if they didn't see it. They were aware of the crime, but because of their cultural values and that they must protect their kinsmen, Achebe therefore misappropriates this proverb because this is not the real, it's not suited properly in this context in order to arrive at what message he's passing to his readers. Here, this of kinsmen or kinship and solidarity among members is more strongly evident when they come together to save Obi from being imprisoned. In spite of Obi's aloofness, his kinsmen are determined to fight for him in the court because they believe in the another proverb that Achebe employs here, that kinsmen in trouble had to be saved, not blamed, because anger against a brother was felt in the flesh, not in the bone. I take it in Igbo. Iwe nwanne anaghị eru n'ọkpụkpụ. So here again, the Achebe misappropriating this proverb, which is one of Igbo proverbs. Achebe misappropriates these two proverbs. The unions agreed to pay for the service of a lawyer in defense of Obi's case. Obi's kinsmen are ready to fight his cause, even when they know that it was an unjust cause, as the Igbo do not fight a war of blame. The Igbo do not subscribe to crime. But here it appears as if Achebe is, through his misappropriation, tends to be encouraging crime here, but that of Igbo values. The Umuafians were critical towards Obi. They do not see Obi's corrupt practice as harmful to the economy of the country, as they believe that if you want to eat a toad, you should look for a good and juicy one. And this one is another of the Igbo proverb that is being misappropriated here, and I take it in Igbo. They later on expressed their extreme happiness and encourages Obi in his material achievements, as they believe in the proverb, a man who lived in the back of the Niger should not wash his hands with spittle. That is, I take it in Igbo again. Onye bi n'azụ osimiri Niger adịghị mma ka o were asọ na-akwa aka, thereby encouraging Obi more in his crime, even though they know that the means of such money is through bribery and corruption. But it appears Achebe is encouraging that, but that is not actually his motive. That they give more importance to community sentiments than to save the country from corruption becomes apparent when they expect Obi to use his position as in restoring Joshua's job, which he has lost due to negligence of duty. They justify their approaching Obi for the favor, as they believe in the proverb, shall we kill a snake and carry it in our hand when we have a bag for putting long things? I take this in Igbo as well. Anyị aga-egbu agwọ kporo ya n'aka ebe anyị nwere ihe eji etinye ihe toro ogologo. Therefore, we see Achebe a kind of misappropriating these proverbs in order to achieve the purpose of expressing the fact that the new the westernization was at variance with the traditional Igbo culture. In as much as the aim of Achebe was not actually to misappropriate or misapply this proverb, but his employment or deployment of this proverb negative tends to negate the main essence of the proverbs in Igbo society. I take one from live discourses because of time, then I summarize from there. One of the Igbo proverbs says, "Mgbe onye ji teta bụ ụtụtụ ya," whenever a person awakes, becomes the person's morning, meaning that the essence of this particular proverb is anchored on self-discovery. Many live without knowing or moving around them, and when their talents, without knowing what is happening around them, or even finding out their purpose of existence. But once, at the moment they discover their purpose, they begin to pursue it vigorously. The essence of this proverb is to enable people operate at their own speed or space or abilities, so as to avoid or limit strife and contentions in the society. But some people misappropriate this proverb. A student during the beginning of the semester was playing around in the morning. Others will attend lectures. One of his classmates asked him that, is it not time you start attending lectures and doing the assignment? He quickly jumped at this proverb that whenever a person awaits, becomes his morning. Therefore, misappropriating this proverb, because this is not the essence of using this proverb in Igbo society. Eventually, he had to end up with failures. So what are we saying? It is important that these proverbs be positively utilized, because misappropriating this proverb will be sending wrong signals to the readers, or our people are listening to them, thinking that that is the values that the Igbo people are trying to portray. And the implication of this misappropriation of this proverb is that it will set a negative precedence in the society for people to indulge in evil. It will lead to divisions and factions in the society. The use of some of the Igbo proverbs is capable of leading to adverse effects in the economy of the society and will amount to setting an evil or bad precedence. So our advocacy in this paper is that the proverbs, because they have both underlying meanings, they should be used within context, and the positive implication, positive meaning should be employed, no matter the justification behind the rationale. Because once the negative proverbs are employed, it goes a long way in sending negative signals to the audience or people that read such work, and thereby bringing a bad image to the Igbo as a people. I'm stopping here. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Ada Aug2020, for your excellent analysis. Can you hear? Yes, Madam.
Hello.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yes, yes, Madam. It was an excellent presentation. You talked about so many areas, about the pre-modern society, about the modernity, our encounter with modernity, the use of proverbs. This excellent social linguistic study has actually opened us to a new way of seeing and interpreting text, major meta-narratives, even by Chinua Achebe. The works are now being, as you have referred to in your paper, the proverbs, the use of proverbs. Proverbs are something that are repositories of our history, of our culture from the below. It is not a written history, it is rather an oral history. But any kind of misrepresentation of such orature or such proverbs in the literary texts that are molded by the Western or modern literary canons should be resisted. So your paper was an excellent opening to this poetics of resistance, how these proverbs are being manipulated by the writers in order to represent and in a way misrepresent the cultures. Thank you, Madam, for enlightening us. So we will invite questions after the sessions. Thank you, Madam, to be with us. And
Thank you.
Yes, Madam, excellent presentation. Thank you. Can we move on to the next speaker? Everyone is eagerly waiting. We could not stop you, Madam, because your paper was so good. So we move on to the next speaker. So we have a panel of very distinguished speakers today. So in this panel, can I have the presence of Adora Lois? You have already presented. Daniel Young, Prince Wepa, are you present? Daniel Young and Prince Wekpa. It is again a joint paper. They were supposed to speak on.
Lillian is present.
Yeah, Daniel Young, you are present. So Daniel
Lillian.
Young, yeah. Yes. So may I invite Daniel Inang and Prince Veka, Department of Akwa Ibom College of Education, Afasaniste, and Department of English, University of Uyo, Nigeria. They were supposed to speak on the cultural confluence and identity construction in Mary Helen Speck's Migratory Animals. So Daniel Young, Prince Vekpa, are you present? So we move on to the next joint paper presentation by Muangor, Adobe, Constance. So Muangor, you are present, and LH Nekechi Ucharya, you are present. You admitted, yeah, you were admitted, I remember. So are you on the line? From University of Nigeria, Nsukka, Muangor, Adaobi, Constance, LH, and Nkechi Ucharya. They were supposed to speak on the thematic analysis of selected proverbs in. So can I have the presence of any speaker? Asika, are you present? Dr. Ichikuku Emmanuel Asika. You were supposed to speak on Egbu Onka in the purview of globalization, emerging perspectives on moonlight games in Igbo-speaking territorial construct of Nigeria. Dr. Ikechukwu Emmanuel Asika, are you present? Samuel Awa has joined us. Samuel Awa, do you want to make your presentation? Last session, your presentation remained incomplete.
Hello, good afternoon.
Okay, Ikuchuku.
Hello, good afternoon.
Okay.
Monago, this is Monago Adobe Constance. Good afternoon.
Okay, Monago Adobe, make your presentation, ma'am.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My presentation, my topic is a thematic analysis of selected proverbs in Achebe's Trilogy. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, madam. Please.
Okay. My work is based on the trilogy on Things Fall Apart, No Longer at Ease, and Arrow of God. And I'm looking at, we are trying to look at the themes and the proverbs in some selected proverbs, not all, selected proverbs there. And then we look at language as a means of conveying culture and identity. And when we talk of culture or language, language and identity, they are like two Siamese twins that cannot be separated. They are like two Siamese twins that cannot be separated. So also is Proverbs. So also is Proverbs. Proverbs is an essential aspect of human communication. Proverbs is an essential aspect of human communication. We look at this Proverbs based on Achebe's trilogy, based on Achebe's work. And people have done works on Proverbs. Many people have done works on Proverbs, but we are looking at the intertextuality of works on this Proverbs. We want to use intertextuality to deconstruct some of the Proverbs used by Achebe, unlike other works done on Proverbs, like the structuralist and the functionalist and the stylistic study of Proverbs. Our theoretical framework, what we want to use is intertextuality. Intertextuality by Christevia, 1966, which shows that every text, no meaning is absolute. No meaning is, every text has another text embedded in it. Now we go over to the objective of this study. Here we want to identify proverbs. We want to identify proverbs which reflect the supremacy of Igbo culture and tradition. We also want to explain how the use of Achebe's proverbs provides meaning of meaning. In Igbo land, it is the proverb. It is only people that proverbs are not just words. They are metaphorical. They are words that need meaning. It needs someone that knows, an elder, to explain or express the meaning of proverb. You don't just understand proverb on the surface. So we are using this intertextuality to deconstruct these proverbs. And then our question is, to what extent has proverb reflected the supremacy of Igbo culture? To what extent has Achebe tried in his proverbs to reflect this the supremacy of this Igbo proverbs? And then our scope, we just we limit our work based on just the three texts, the three consecutive texts that Achebe wrote, the trilogy, the Arrow of God, the Things Fall Apart, No Longer at Ease, and then the Arrow of God. And then we look at the analysis of these proverbs. First, we look at the colonization and disunity. In these three works of Achebe, Achebe tries to show that the westernization brought disunity and colonization to Igbo custom and tradition. Achebe tries to show that the people of the Igbo land, the Igbo man, was disorganized. The unity that was there before the coming of the white man was disorganized by this Westerners. That is why in Arrow of God, Ezolu sent his son Oduche to learn the white man's culture. Oduche had to hide the sacred python, which is the custom which is tradition of the people not to kill. They don't have to kill the python, but Oduche had to hide this python. In fact, he had to kill. He had to hide this python and into a box, and this is as a result of disunity, as a result of westernization. Again, we also look at the theme of Christianity We also look at, hello? We also look at the theme of Christianity versus traditional religion. We find out that when the white man came, there was problem, there was issue. I can hear. There was issue between the traditionalists and the Christian religion. In honor of God, the people of Omaro had strong belief in their God, and its chief priest. Religion is one of the important issues stated in the novel. For instance, it is forbidden for the chief priest to declare or eat new yam before the new moon, and this was one of its punishment measures Ezra used for his people. You know, when the white men, when they came, the people were not going from, you know, they were like, they were living.
Please, I really know.
They were
I really
living.
want to know when I'm to speak. I really want to know when I'm.
They were living. They left traditional religion to the white man's religion. So Ezra decided to punish them by not announcing, by not eating the last yam, because if he doesn't eat the last yam, he will not announce for the new yam. He will not eat the new yam, and because of this, there was famine. This brought about famine, and this brought about the fall, the tragic fall of
I want to know when I'm
Ezra.
going to present.
And then, in No Longer at Ease, Obi Okonkwo shows that every man is equal because of westernization. When he wanted to marry Clara, he decided, because Clara is an outcast, Obi Okonkwo decided that he must marry Clara because every man is equal in the sight of God. This thereby going against the,
I really want to know when I'm going to present.
of
I'm
the
listening to Adobe.
because thereby going against the custom and tradition of the people. And then lastly, we look at male-oriented society. In Achebe's work, in this trilogy, Achebe tries to show that he portrays male supremacy over female. Achebe tries to show that, in fact, just like Nigerians here will say that women or women are being relegated. Achebe tries to show that men are more to be respected than women. Obi Okonkwo in Things Fall Apart was telling his son Moye that he doesn't want him to be like his father, who is a never-do-well. He wants him to be a strong man. That was why when he was cutting the seed yam for planting, Okonkwo was asking him, is the yam for eating or for planting? He wants him to be grown. He wants him to be, to be strong like him. Ezolo in his own aspect told Edogo, his son, who is a craftsman, that he wants him to be as aggressive as him, bringing out the male supremacy over women. In everything about Achebe revolves round about men, revolves round in male supremacy. And then finally, I have societal opposition. All the protagonists in Achebe's trilogy stand to some extent in opposition to their society. They stand in opposition to their society. They do that which they want, not minding what the society thinks about or not minding what the society wants them to do. It is that which they want that they do. And conclusively, if allusion to English literature is what is constantly driving us to Western education, Proverbs draws us and brings us back to our culture and tradition, because it is the proverb. Proverb is just like a vehicle that shows us, that leads us to our tradition, that makes us understand more our culture and tradition. Thank you. You're welcome. I heard what you said.
Thank you. Some networking issues were there, resolved. Thank you, madam. The clear streaming was there. Excellent analysis of again the proverbs, and you have shown another aspect of the use of proverbs. So it was an excellent, well-researched paper presentation. We would invite question after the end, at the end of the session. So we have with us now Ichikubu Ikwu. His connection got disrupted, so he is now Iktu. Are you there on the line? Professor Igubutu? Are you there online? So again disconnected. So in the panel we have, I again call the names of the persons impaneled in this session, for this session. So just respond by switching on the mic. Okay, respond by switching on the mic so that I can understand whether the paper presentation is there or not. So for this technical session 9, we had Ali Abdul Wahid RBC. Are you present? Ali Abdul. Bamale Zubairu Lawal.
Yes, I'm present.
Okay. Are you present? Thank you, sir.
Yes, I'm present.
Yes. You can make your presentation, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. The title of my paper is the Hausa Worldview on the Ethical Justification of the Death Penalty. Now, leveraging on Hausa oral literature, especially Proverbs, which undergirds the Hausa ethical thought, the paper probes the practice of death penalty in Hausa society with a view to showing that the death penalty is an ethically excusable practice whose justification is found in the manner by which the Hausa people of particularly Kano, Katsina, Sokoto, generally of the north, central, and northwestern Nigeria confront a complex world metaphysically conceived as being transitory, hard, capricious, and unpredictable. This is among all other things. Now, the paper talks about original Hausa culture before foreign contact with especially the Arabs. Now, by way of introduction, because the death penalty deals with questions of the value of human life and how best to protect it, discussions on the death penalty always occupy a central position in human life across time and space as a tool of social control and effective one at that. Therefore, the death penalty has had significant presence and acceptance in virtually every society in the world. Such presence and acceptance, although at varying length, thrived with very little hostility until the age of enlightenment, when opposition against the death penalty, precipitated by liberal, utilitarian, and humanistic ideas, began. The paper attempts to show through Hausa proverbs and rituals that the death penalty has always been present and acceptable in Hausa culture. The choice of proverbs and ritual is suitable because African values and beliefs are expressed verbally or through symbols or ritual. Thus, proverbs which are verbal expressions are used by the Hausa people to portray Hausa ethics, Hausa worldview, Hausa legal system, etc. Now, this is the second part of the presentation, which is captioned rituals, ceremonies, and other death penalty in Hausa culture. Now, akin to what has been practiced by the first men in Ethiopia and Greece, Arabia, etc., idol worship, which was done with a view to satisfying human wants and needs. Magic, which in Hausa language was in the form of what the Hausa people call tsafi and bori, was an integral part of Hausa culture and was incorporated in virtually all aspects of the lives of the Hausa people, informed by the Hausa conception of the universe. The Hausa cultural view about the universe is metaphysical, so to speak. They think the world is complex and is prone to chaos because it's among other things, transitory, hard, capricious, and unpredictable. The Hausa culture is therefore structured to confront the world such that everything they do is carefully designed to not conflict with the world in order that the chaos is averted. Although the African traditional justice system was generally compensatory, it was also partly retributive, and it is in the latter that the death penalty is found. Now, the third part of the paper is titled Mother, Theft, Chastity, and the Death Penalty. Now, perhaps it is because it is assumed that virtually every culture regarded murder as an action that attracted the death penalty, that murder needs not much discourse. In any case, since the Hausas are Africans, and it may be inferred that murder was a crime in Hausa culture that attracted the death penalty. Now, other actions that attracted the death penalty in Hausa culture are, however, said to be reflected in some of the Hausa cultural practices. In Hausa culture, for instance, agriculture and farming was held in high esteem. Other than just quenching hunger, agricultural yields was used in the Hausa cultural practices of what is called gara in Hausa culture, in Hausa language. In the Hausa cultural practices of what is called gara in Hausa language, something that is still practiced till date. It is a practice in which a newlywed female is accompanied with large agricultural produce to her matrimonial home. The quantity of such agricultural produce accompanying the newlywed female determines her worth. The practice is articulated in the proverb that Hausa invoke usually to say "Zaman lafiya ya fi gara," which literally means in English, peaceful living is worth more than wedding commodities. The Hausa invoke this proverb to assert that gara is so important that its forfeiture is only justified when it is done to maintain peaceful coexistence. So because of the importance of agricultural produce, there is a certain idol or goddess, which in Hausa language was called Wargona, meaning the custodian of the farms, that is so revered in Hausa culture, such that so many sacrifices were often offered to please her for her strategic role in the provisions and protection of agricultural produce. The things often offered as sacrifice to Wargona were wet sheep, chickens, and pumpkins. In Hausa culture, Wargona prevents thieves from stealing agricultural produce and served as an executioner of those guilty of stealing agricultural produce by making their stomachs swell until they die. Now, chastity in Hausa culture is also a revered virtue that the Hausa people took so serious, so much that being unchaste attracted the death penalty. It is the practice of the pre-Islamic Hausa culture to ask someone to use a tool that looks like a magical knife to strike a goat with it, with the aim of slicing it into two. The chastity of the girl is established when the man is able to slice the goat into one, to slice the goat in one stroke. But in the event that the girl is unchaste, that man will never be able to slice the goat with that magical knife, no matter how many times he tried. Now, the Hausa people are not unmindful of the fact that punishment entails causing pain on the person to be punished, even when they believe punishment is a necessary tool for social control.